Dag Eve August Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and it is well. I'll be honest with you. It's coffee time. It's bright and early here in Ireland, and it is coffee time. And I'm trying to build better habits. And this is something that I learned through my partner Laura. This idea of, I think it's actually a book. It's called Atomic Habits, which kind of breaks down the psychology of making a habit and habit forming behaviors, and how to stack one thing on top of another in order to create a free flowing habitual kind of routine that supports and enables your day. So one of my routines, which is pretty much solidly in play, is morning coffee. And so I'm trying to build from that and say, well, what if morning coffee wasn't just me with my morning coffee in a book? What if my morning coffee was sharing a bit of recording time with community, or taking a few minutes to answer one of our questions and answers that we get from our awesome community? So, um, yeah, that's where we are. That's what we're doing. It is bright and early, and this is my coffee. I also, speaking of routines and healthy pagan practices, my routine is also when I make a coffee, it's over on the opposite side here. I make one for the Dagda. And so that's Dagda's coffee down there, in a Pride Flag love mug, which I love as well. So yeah, if I'm going to spend my time, taking a moment out with my deity for a coffee, then why not stack on top of that in the Atomic Habit style to take a bit of time with community as well? Can't promise I'm going to be brilliant at it, but I'm going to do my best whenever I do this. So, what we have here is a brilliant and awesome kind of question, which is nice and insightful from a member of our community by the name of Lauren. So, I'm going to read that out for us. Laura sent out an email a while ago. It's like three common mistakes in paganism, or three common mistakes. And it was designed to stimulate a bit of thought. It was designed to stimulate that introspection and that self awareness. And we were wondering, like, we were trying to, get an idea of, like, have you made these mistakes? So, what is it then? If you had a question that followed from those, like, what would it be? So we got a great volume of questions, which is brilliant. And this is one that I thought I'd sit and answer with you today, or speak to. I'm going to do my best to speak to, because I can't promise I will always answer specific. Anyway, let's get into this. Um, so Lauren emailed us. Personally, I believe that paganism was a very wonderful, and I am grateful for the free resources and your wise advice, as I've certainly made such mistakes before. I apologize if I have caused hurt. So, thank you. The reason why we give as much as we can in regards to these resources is to try and help people have it a little bit easier than we did. That's why we set up the Irish Pagan School. That's why we write the books. It's not out of any self-aggrandizement. It's not out of any ego trip or cult of personality. It's literally to say, it would have been helpful if this information had existed when I was trying to figure it out. And so we're delighted to be able to give as much as we can whenever, wherever we can. My question is, does someone have to earn the right to be pagan? Though I understand that people must be well read and research history, etc., behind the practices they admire in order to be respectful, may mistakes be part of the spiritual development process as well? Sometimes I wonder if spirituality is also a very personal journey that can be shaped by one's inner world and perspective, which is why some people may mistake the form of the beings that they connect with, or end up with a slightly off kilter amalgamation of spiritual beliefs sometimes. Definitely during my early years of spirituality as well. I'm definitely not excusing appropriation, though. That is indeed bad. Kind regards, Lauren. Um, this is a great question, Lauren. It is absolutely a great question, and it shows really that you're hitting the right marks for the introspection that we would hope that most people would get. The awareness of, like, okay, well, I may have my own spiritual practice, but am I causing harm? Am I having a negative impact despite what my beliefs would say? Um, and like, straight away at the top, everyone makes mistakes. Absolutely everyone makes mistakes. It is how we learn from and grow from those mistakes that actually define what our spirituality is. So to dive right to the top end question there, does someone have to earn the right to be pagan? No. Pagan is an umbrella term for many different kinds of spirituality or different aspects or religious practices, but they all have certain kind of corner elements that define a spirituality or a spiritual path as pagan. Like reverence for nature, a belief in polytheism, multiple deities, and meditation and introspection as part of it, and then a belief in magical practice or intentional energy work. So, following that definition, there are many different, again, spiritual pathways that are pagan. So, does someone have to earn the right to practice their spiritual path? No, no. In my personal opinion on this, and something me and Laura kind of definitely agree on, is that we're spiritual beings as much as we are emotional beings, as much as we are physical beings, as much as we are intelligent beings. And so, the way that a person chooses to express their spirituality is a right to them. Like, in the same way that they choose to express their physicality, they choose to express their emotions. Like, it is part of a process. So there are always going to be elements that just are part of the human condition. You may have emotions, but sometimes you don't get to choose how they express through you. The emotions happen on you, and but then you have to deal with them and process through them. And that is the same with spirituality. But you don't have to earn your right to be pagan, to declare yourself as pagan, to practice your pagan and your spirituality. In my own past and in my own history, when I came out of Catholicism, and when I was disillusioned with the Catholic Church, I referred to myself as Christian, but that didn't have answers for me. And so I then began to explore as much religious and dogma and books as I could get my hands on. And I got to the point of referring to myself as a religious, in that, like, I wasn't agnostic, I didn't believe in, or atheist, I didn't believe in no God, or I believed that there was something. I just hadn't figured out what it was, but I was not religious about it. It turns out, though, my reverence for nature was still there. My belief in multiple gods was still there. So when I was referring myself as a religious, I was actually practicing paganism. But I was not part of any pagan group. I was never part of any pagan structure. I was never part of any pagan-based spirituality. None of that at all. Like, I was just taking my regular trips out to be amongst nature because that's where I found peace. To run around on the hill of Tara with the dog, and that because that's where I found comfort. And like a sense of ease within myself during a very turbulent time in my life. So, do you have to earn your right to be pagan? Absolutely fucking not. Now, there are some spiritual paths which are pagan that may have, I want to say this right and not speak out of turn. There are many different types of spiritual paths, and some of those spiritual paths may have, as part of their structure, a certain amount of auto proxy. There are two kind of major formats of religion. There's autocratic, where like you do what I tell you to do, and that's how you practice your faith. And most of the big religions are that. But then there's also autoproxic, which is um, sorry, the autocratic is you tell someone why and then leave them to do it. Autoproxic is you tell them what to do, and it's on them to figure out the why. And so there are many different religious practices out there which have some structure, which have some um, initiation ritual, I suppose, is the way to go, and process. And those, you like, as part of any vetting society, like, if okay, I didn't want to get into horror stories, but I've heard horror stories about people being initiated into ritual practices, initiated into energy circles and energy works, without vetting, and then that just damages and harms everyone else who's exposed to that interconnected energy. Because part of some spiritual practices is about the working and use of energy along and aligning with other people, and in order to do that effectively, there is an interaction or energy shared that has happened, or that does happen. And if you bring inappropriate or incorrect elements into that, it can be very harmful. Also, if you expose people who may not be mature enough yet, may not have grown up enough yet, may have their own personal unresolved traumas to like into intentional energy work at a certain level, it can be harmful to them as well. So um there is no barrier to entry to be pagan, But I do want to acknowledge that there are some, say, closed practices out there that may have like boundaries, around what is safe and secure behavior. Much like the Irish Pagan School host many Facebook communities and social communities, and we have boundaries. Right? They're not there to kind of restrict or to control the flow of energy. They're not there to demand obedience from people or anything like that at all. They're not there to gatekeep and like restrict people's access to information. They're there to keep the space safe. That's fundamentally it. Like if there's a gate, yeah, the gate is open. Yeah, come in. Just don't be an asshat. You know, we have people who watch. Our moderators are absolutely amazing, volunteer, amazing people of our community who give their energy and their time to help keep the space safe for other people. You know, so again, you don't have to earn your place to be amongst community, but there is certain levels of respect and responsibility that are inherently part of that to retain your space as part of community, if that makes sense. Um, so you mentioned here, I understand that people must be well read and research history, etc. You don't have to, okay? We encourage people very strongly to know where the information comes from, to know what resources are available to them, and to read the resources, because that's really what helps deepen one's connection to a spiritual path or practice. But it's not a must. We're not going to say, oh, well, you didn't take John's class on the Dita, so therefore you cannot ever communicate with it. That is bullshit. That really is. All we ever offer at the school, all of our teaching is about providing good resources so a person, when they're able to and when they choose to, can go deeper. If your spiritual paganism is every day go out and hug a tree, perfect. If you want to know the neurological science about exposing yourself to, a chlorophyll-based entity who consumes carbon dioxide and exudes oxygen, and how that actually literally scientifically impacts the biology of your body to create, you know, positive endorphin effects in your brain, we can do that. That's the science of it. But you don't have to know every single aspect of it for it to still work. Now, when it comes to deeper practices, when it comes to like deepening your connection with a deity, getting into kind of contract relationships and ongoing service or work to a deity or even to a community, when if a community sees or chooses to accept you in a position of leadership or priesthood, you know, then you really have to step up your game. You need to have that awareness that the information that you're imparting or that you're embodying by your lived practices is still having an impact on other people, and it behooves all of us to do the reading. But again, we're not going to say you must do the reading. There are like deeper classes like the Morrigan Intensive, for example, that we run. Um we we say that people need to have a grounding in Morrigan information if they're going to get the most out of the Morrigan Intensive. And that's why we say, here's all of these other classes, here's stuff that you should have on board. But we're not going to restrict someone access to that level of teaching and experience if they haven't ticked the boxes on those other classes, you know. It is something we look at. It is something that is assessed, and as an obligation to ourselves, and especially to Laura, who administers that intensive program on behalf of the Morrigan, like when like we have to do a due diligence for safety and security reasons, um for the person who wants to take the class, or the person who wants to go deeper in their connection, as much as for the rest of the community who is also going to be sharing that space and sharing that work. um but again, it's not a you must have. It's more, this is the way it really should, could, would benefit you to understand these things. And that's again knowing your sources. That's again knowing where it's coming from, and knowing where it comes from means that you can figure out the why. And that why is where we move into the next kind of aspects of your question there, because it is a personal process. All of our spiritual practices is a personal journey, but we need to get to that point of getting an understanding of our own why. Um, so I'm rambling a little bit, so I'm going to dive back onto the actual specific questions. Um, so yeah, oh yeah, it's here, like, you must have a reading of yeah, you don't need to know the history. Like you don't. it benefits you to understand where it comes from. It benefits you, especially when you're dealing with cultural appropriation, to understand the culture. Perfect example of this is there's a movie out with Colin Farrell and it's Brendan Meehan. Yeah. At the moment, and it's called The Banshees of Innisclaren, and it's a period piece. It's set in the past of Ireland, but someone in social media recently was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that that's not Ireland now." The lads are like, having conversations by candlelight in a thatch roof on the back of an island. You know, that's not Ireland. That's not Ireland now. And so it shows that bit of a disconnect between the living the living culture from which the spirituality comes when a person doesn't have the information and the facts. And that's where things can get broken down and damaged. So it benefits the person looking to practice the paganism, and it doesn't even have to be Irish paganism, whatever paganism you're experiencing or practicing, it benefits to know the culture it's coming from, to know the history of it, to know the influences of it, so that you don't make the small or personally damaging or community damaging mistakes like appropriation, as you mentioned above. So, may mistakes be part of a spiritual development process as well? Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, there is nothing wrong with making a mistake as long as you learn from the mistake. That is the only thing to follow with that. Like whenever we make a mistake is a lesson. A mistake is an opportunity to learn something, to change our perspective, to grow from a moment where things didn't go well. And in the past, as a youth and as a young kid, my mistakes frustrated the heck out of me. I demanded so much of myself, that I I got wound up with anxiety as a kid for fear of making a mistake. So I wouldn't do a thing because what if I made a mistake? Now I am much more grown here, and I've managed to reframe mistakes as opportunities, opportunities for learning, opportunities to challenge my perspective on something and to learn about it, because I don't know what I don't know. And if I make a mistake, I'm more than happy to acknowledge the fact that, well, I made a mistake. Absolutely. Like, put the ego aside and, take it on hand and say, yeah, absolutely. This is fantastic. I'd love to learn more about this and to do it. So mistakes, hugely part of spiritual development. I've made many mistakes in my spiritual development over time, but I learned from them, and that's why I'm still here. And that's why I'm able to still do what I do. Um, so the last kind of paragraph really is the kind of core here that kind of sets true, and I definitely agree with good bits of it. Sometimes I wonder if spirituality is also a personal spiritual journey that can be shaped by one's inner world and perspective. It is. No matter what form of paganism you practice, no matter who you see as your mentors, your teachers, your community leaders, your priests, no matter what form of ritual practice, words, or whatever you're doing, your spirituality is a personal journey. It's a personal exploration of an aspect of your being. And you're empowered by that, but also responsible for that. And if okay, I'm trying to be delicate here when I really maybe should be a little bit blunt. I have had we have had in the school very difficult conversations with people who just go, well, it's my personal spiritual journey. And they use that as some kind of blockage or shield against learning, against, accepting that they may have made a mistake, or against challenging their perspectives to do more. We've had people talk about, this other world's spirit known as the Banon T, which is a house spirit who's helpful and whatever, which is absolute fucking horseshit. Banon T is an Irish term for woman of the house. And it was not some little helper gnome cleaning up woman. It was literally the woman who ruled the household. In the old Irish like homesteads, the woman ruled the household, and like You may be out cutting the field, you may be out like, doing whatever, taking care of the cattle or whatever. But when you come to that doorstep, you're the woman of the house runs the show. And that's why we have such a healthy respect for the Irish mammy down the generations to today. Um, so like that's a prime example of a misinformation be like damaging someone's personal practice, but then also damaging the culture that it's inspired by, or in that person's instance, taken from. Um, so like the same thing, there was a person who published a book, The Way of the Shan Van. Shan Van is old woman, and they were trying to take these Irish words for Shan Van and shove them together and say that that's where shaman comes from, and this is their ancient practice handed down to generations from. Load of me hoop. Sorry, I'm very emotive about that particular one because that is specifically bad information, damaging our culture. There's a video on YouTube here where there was an interview with myself and Laura, Amy, and another member of our community who was very upset by that book, and we talked about it. And it's like it's how misinformation isn't just bad; it's actually damaging. So people turning around and saying, "Well, it's my own personal journey." That's how we end up with generations of people who followed like Caitlin Matthews. What's it, John and Caitlin Matthews, or people who followed the Robert Graves kind of tree ohm and take that as sanctified. Like there are lots of absolute fucking terrible stuff out there that, you know, are just bad resources. They're just bad resources that have become part of people's traditions. That's the other one. Well, it's part of my tradition. It's like, okay, how old is your tradition? Well, it's like two, three generations old. I was like, yeah, my country is thousands of years old. My country is at least like 15,000 years old, if not more, because of the archaeology we have. And you're going to tell me that like what you're practicing doesn't impact on my country when you're bastardizing my native language and manipulating words to suit your own agenda. Sorry, not you, Lauren. This is like that is what we deal with, and that is the challenge of it. So, like, yes, it is a personal journey. It is you. At the end of the fucking day, you may come to me and talk to me about the Dagda. You might go to like Laura and talk about the Morrigan. You might come to both of us at the Irish Pagan School and talk about any of the gods, goddesses, guides, guardians, any of the spiritual traditions, ritual practices, and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, it's your journey. It's on you to kind of take the next step to learn from the mistakes and to find out what it is that you're here for and experiencing, and like how to take the next stages in your spiritual growth so that you can get to wherever the journey is going to take you. And that is the beauty of it as well. Like, it is the ownership and the empowerment. Like the moment you say that it is my own spiritual growth, it is my own spiritual journey, there's huge amount of power that comes from that declaration alone. Like, that's aligning your energy with the intent along your own journey. And for all of us pagans, we know when you mix energy with intent, you get magic. So there's a huge amount of power to be able to do that. But again, with great power comes great responsibility. I may have my own relationship and my passion and my journey with the Dagda, which I talk about, but I always ever talk about it as my journey. I don't tell anyone else their journey with the Dagda. Some people contact me for spiritual consultations, and I do my best to talk them through it, to give them, you know, insights from my own journey in many ways, but then also perspectives on what information they're providing to me. And then on occasion, yeah, I will say that sometimes the Dagda's like, poke, poke, I want you to include. And I always caveat and was like, okay, I'm having a personal experience here. This is the information I'm receiving. Take it or leave it as you see fit, because that's how it has to be at the end of the day. And that's why we provide so much resources at the Irish Pagan School. That's why we provide so much free resources out there as much as we can. There's more free resources available from us than there is paid resources, because we want our community to grow. We want the community all around the world to have it easier than we had it. To avoid the mistakes, to avoid the pitfalls of bad resources, to avoid the mistakes of like, handed down information from people who had an ulterior motive or agenda. And if we can help people avoid those mistakes or, come back from those mistakes, and they learn from them, then invariably they're going to go further with their spiritual journey. And that's what it has to be at the end of the day. Um, you're right though, there is no excuse for appropriation, but you know, I do kind of go to one of the mottos that we have developed within our community here. And it is from Maya Angelou, and it's like, do the best you can. And when you know better, just do better. Again, you don't know what you don't know. But, ignorance, it might be bliss, but it's also kind of no excuse. So it is a matter of kind of when you know better, do better. Like, when you can claim, oh, well, I wasn't aware of that. But if you come back to me again and say, oh, well, I wasn't aware of that for the second time, it's like on the same thing. And I was like, well, no, you should be aware of that. We provided all of these resources. Well, I didn't do all of the reading. Okay, that you don't have to do all of the reading, but it would benefit you to do these readings, if that makes sense. So, yeah, there are many different people who end up with an amalgamation of spiritual beliefs, and it is about their journey as they go through. It is about the steps and stages that they take along the path to figure out their spiritual growth. I've done it myself. I have been through many different types of religions trying to find what fit with me. But behind all of it, I was still the kid who'd be lost in the woods hugging trees. Like, the kid who would be away in nature talking to the gods, the kid who would, like, acknowledge the existence of all the gods, even non-Irish gods, when he was when and just talk to them. Found it all very fascinating. So I think I've said a lot, and I really hope I've added some perspective to your question there, Lauren. Um, you don't have to earn your place to be pagan. No one can declare that for you. That is just a spiritual path that you can choose to follow. But the best way to follow that is from an informed position, engaging with the resources available to you, doing better by yourself whenever you know better by yourself, and then finding people who fit alongside your personal spiritual journey because they're on their own personal spiritual journey. And that's where things like pagan community comes in, and that's where being able to share experiences in safe spaces like the Irish Pagan School community groups or like our online sessions, the second Saturdays. There's a big benefit of saying, okay, well, I am on my own personal spiritual journey, but I'm not the only one on a personal spiritual journey. And sometimes someone else's journey might be similar to my journey, or we might have stopped at the same signpost somewhere along the way, or we might be following the Irish paganism as from the school and the teachings that we give. But it is their personal spiritual journey, and all we have ever wanted, all Laura and I have ever wanted, is to make it easier for people and to help them along their journey so it's not as hard for them. Okay, so that has been my coffee chat for this morning. I will say thank you very, very much, Gurav Mili Mili Mahagas, Lauren, for an amazing and awesome question. And for everyone out there, I hope you've gained some perspective from it and look after yourself. Remember, you're the only one of you who will ever be. So be the best you can be. Slán. Goodbye.